Hello everyone and welcome back to Turkish series stars. I hope your day is calm, because today we are unpacking a confession that hit close to home for two faces we all follow closely, Barış Arduç and Elçin Sangu. A few quiet words, a private moment, and a phrase that many of us have whispered to ourselves when the pressure is too heavy: I don't want to think about the future anymore. It sounds simple, but with them it carried the weight of busy sets, relentless headlines, and that invisible tug of expectations that never seems to let go. If you have ever felt that same knot in your chest, if planning what comes next steals the light from what is right here, this story will feel painfully familiar. Before we dive in, if you love these deep dives into the hearts behind the headlines, make sure you subscribe to Turkish series stars. Your support keeps this space alive and ensures you will not miss the next chapter of the journeys we share. Now, back to that evening. The lights were off in the living room, a script lay open on the table, and the city hummed outside. Barış sat there longer than usual, fingertips resting on the edge of the script, gaze drifting past the words as if they belonged to someone else's life. Elçin noticed it before he spoke. She knows the rhythm of his breathing on the days when the cameras are kind and the nights when worries stretch on. When he finally said he did not want to think about the future anymore, the sentence did not arrive as a declaration. It felt like a bruise surfacing, the quiet sound of something that has carried too much for too long. What hides behind that sentiment is never just laziness or defiance. Often it is a map of old disappointments, the kind you learn to carry without showing, and it was no different for them. They are praised for poise and resilience, for appearing to have it all figured out, but we forget how many times a carefully laid plan has been cut short at the last minute. You think you can control the pace of your career, the story arc of your life, but then a project gets shelved, a role goes to someone else, a season ends abruptly, and you realize the future was only ever a sketch. When you spend enough nights drawing castles in the air, only to wake and find the floor shaking, of course you grow wary of dreaming out loud. In their world, everything whispers plan ahead. Agents talk about strategic moves. Producers ask what comes next. Fans obsess over reunions and milestones. There are roadmaps for ratings, timelines for premieres, and an endless queue of questions about when, where, and how. It would exhaust anyone. So when Barış voiced that he wanted to stop thinking about what is still a horizon, it was not a plea to be careless. It sounded more like a protest against the relentless drumbeat of later, later, later. A desire to land in now, to feel a simple evening without wondering which scene will be judged next or where the next twist will come from. But is it possible, or even wise, to shut the door on tomorrow completely? They both knew the answer. The future is the engine that nudges us to grow and create. Without some sense of the road ahead, who would step into the cold morning and face the first cue of the day? The problem is not the thought of the future. It is the way that thought can swell until it drowns out everything else. When forward becomes a fixation, when it morphs into a shadow that stretches over every smile, then it is time to look at the relationship we have with it. There was disillusionment in the room that night too, a quiet inventory of places where hope had not landed. They had poured attention into certain paths, certain promises, certain collaborations that looked glossy in meetings and fell apart under the blunt light of reality. Sometimes there were no villains, just timing that did not align, budgets that shifted, scripts that lost their heart in revisions. The result is still the same: you give a part of yourself to a version of the future and return to find it thinner, paler than you imagined. You feel let down, and that sting urges you to retreat, to save your energy, to settle for what is in your hands and stop chasing what refuses to be caught. The feeling of being trapped can grow easily in such seasons. A relentless schedule meets endless speculation, and the noise never lowers. If today already demands every ounce you can muster, the idea of a better tomorrow starts to feel like a cruel joke. Why anticipate if anticipation hurts? The mind bargains with itself. If I avoid thinking about what comes after, maybe I will soften the ache. It works for a while, like a blanket you pull over your head. But in the long run it keeps you from noticing small doors that open quietly when you are not looking. So what did they do with that realization? The first piece was simple and hard, they allowed it to be true. Feeling overwhelmed by later is not a flaw, it is human. Naming it out loud softened its edges. In that silence after the confession, the two of them decided to treat the feeling with respect instead of shame. That choice is more radical than it sounds. When you stop fighting the fact that you are tired of tomorrow, you make space to learn a different way of standing in the present. They turned to the simplest practices. On set, between takes, they began training their attention to the moment at hand. Not to fix everything, not to rewrite their history, just to return to breath, to the weight of the costume, to the floor mark beneath their feet, to the warmth of a cup in the hand. When the mind ran toward worries, they noticed it and brought it back. It was not enlightenment. It was repetition. And repetition changed the day. They also rewrote their contract with uncertainty. In their industry, nothing is guaranteed. Ratings, renewals, headlines, gossip storms, all move like weather. Trying to control every cloud only guarantees exhaustion. Instead, they focused on the one piece they could actually steer: response. How to show up when things tilt. How to speak when rumors flare. How to be decent when the day is not. The future remained changeable, but they were steadier in the wind. Unrealistic expectations had to be loosened too. We all hold an image of how success should arrive, how love should look, how each year should climb neatly upward. They did as well. Letting those images soften did not mean giving up. It meant making room for versions of life that were different, not worse. Some of their best chapters had come from detours they would never have chosen in a meeting. Remembering that helped reframe uncertainty as a door instead of a wall. They broke big worries into smaller pieces. Instead of staring down months of demands, they chose next right actions. Call the coach. Read the scene once, then once more. Make dinner and eat it without phones. Answer one email that matters. Send 2 messages filled with gratitude. Then rest. Tomorrow would not be solved by panic, but it could be influenced by how they moved today. That shift lowered the volume on the future and gave the present a voice again. Gratitude played a bigger role than either expected. It started quietly, as most transformative things do. They listed what was already good. Crew members who see them clearly, a director who trusts them, the comfort of a home that smells like coffee in the morning, the warmth of fans who keep believing even when seasons change, the stubborn friendship that steadies love on days when romance feels small. It is surprisingly hard to be grateful and afraid at the same time. The more they named what was here, the less urgent the imaginary future felt. And they asked for help when the knot tightened. Friends who have weathered similar storms. Family who can pull you out of your own story long enough to remember who you are. Professionals who understand the mind and know how to give it tools, not clichés. There is bravery in admitting that your coping is not coping. It allowed them to gather strategies instead of self-judgment. None of this was a miracle cure. The pressure did not dissolve, the headlines did not retire, the industry did not grow merciful overnight. But their relationship with the future changed shape. It moved from a threat to a companion they did not need to chase or fear. They still plan, of course. They still have dreams that make their eyes light up. They simply refuse to let tomorrow bully today. If any of this echoes something inside you, take it as permission to hold your own confession with gentleness. You do not need to banish the future. You can choose to notice it, nod to it, and come back to the ground beneath your feet. That is where your life happens anyway. That is where every role is rehearsed, every line is remembered, every real laugh is born. For Barış and Elçin, the practice became a ritual. Start the day with what is real, end it with gratitude, let tomorrow approach at its own measured pace. They learned to speak differently in interviews too. When pushed about what is next, they answer with honesty without surrendering peace. We are working on being present, they say with a half smile that says more than the words. We are building without breaking ourselves. The future, as it turns out, respects that. It arrives without drama when you stop trying to drag it forward. So if the sentence "I don't want to think about the future anymore" has sat quietly in your chest, you are not alone. It is not a weakness to say it, and not a sin to mean it. Let it draw you toward practices that lighten your day. Let it be the door to presence rather than the wall that blocks hope. Take smaller steps, adjust what you expect, accept what you cannot hold in your hands, and be unreasonably grateful for what you can. This is not an escape. It is a way of coming home. Thank you for spending this time with us on Turkish series stars. Tell us what part of their journey mirrors yours. Have you ever hit that point where thinking about tomorrow felt like too much? How did you pull yourself back to now? Share your story below. Your words help someone else breathe easier. If you found comfort or clarity here, like this video, pass it to a friend who might need it, and subscribe so you do not miss our next conversation. We will be here, steady and curious, following the human hearts of the people we admire. Until then, take care of today, and let tomorrow take care of itself.